Costa is going to take us through the first talk. And for those of you who know Costa, he's a man who needs little introduction. In fact, he hasn't given me a bio because he's famous in terms of his passion and not only in his own profession, and he's also very humble. So he's going to tell us about history revealed in CASTELLORIZO. And Costa's style is interactive, so he would like you to interject politely, mind you, through the talk, and he'll take us through it. So Costa, please welcome Costa.
Thank you, Stephen. Kalimera. Happy Australia Day. The title, History Revisited, isn't actually correct. What I'd like to talk about is how history interacts with geography and the importance of CASTELLORIZO today, this moment. And there's a historical timeline up there which shows you that CASTELLORIZO has a 3,000 years history. But for most of that time, we don't know what happened in CASTELLORIZO, and that's the truth. We may be able to ponder, we might be able to guess, but we do not know very well the history of CASTELLORIZO. There's only a few references to ancient CASTELLORIZO in a handful of writings, just very short references. And it's only the last 200 years of CASTELLORIZO history that is well known and well documented. So what is actually needed to try and fill in the gaps are some archaeological diggings on CASTELLORIZO, because the historical record is very poor. It won't be increased. Nothing else will be discovered over the next few years. So the archaeological diggings is the only way we'll know about ancient CASTELLORIZO, or even medieval CASTELLORIZO. But I'd like to say a couple of things about ancient CASTELLORIZO that the archaeological survey that Norman Ashton did about 20 years ago revealed. And that is that most of the people live on the middle part of the island, around the Palio Castro, which was the Acropolis of the island. So the population lived there, not where the settlement is today on the harbour or in Mandaraki. They lived in the middle part of the island. And what did CASTELLORIZO do, or Castellorians do as a living in antiquity? Well, they produced grapes and wine. That was the main item of production in ancient CASTELLORIZO, and olive oil as well. And how do we know that? Because there's a whole lot of treasuries that are in the middle part of the island, all around the island, Patitiria. So that was what CASTELLORIZO did in antiquity. So to find out more about ancient CASTELLORIZO, I repeat, we need to do these archaeological diggings, and especially around old cemeteries, and we could discover a lot more. There is one interesting item in the Louvre Museum in Paris. It's a sarcophagus from CASTELLORIZO, which is an exceptional work of art, and it shows that there was someone very rich on CASTELLORIZO. So that indicates that the island was wealthy in antiquity as well. But coming to the 19th and 20th century, that has been recorded. Nick Pappas has spoken and written about it, and that's where CASTELLORIZO prosperity occurred. But there is a table of islands that had ships in 1813. I wonder, Michael, if you can find that table in Augusta. And it shows that in 1813, CASTELLORIZO was quite a large shipping centre. So it did start at the beginning of the 19th century, and as much as we don't like to admit it, the Turkish rule over CASTELLORIZO was very benign, and it helped CASTELLORIZO do well, incredibly well. The other thing which is interesting about CASTELLORIZO is that it was not on the maps. We have literally hundreds of maps from the medieval period up until the 17th, 18th century, especially because the Italians ruled Crete and Cyprus. And on all these maps on on most of these maps, 90% of maps, Castellorizo does not appear. And this is very strange. And somehow the Castellorians managed to stay under the radar, and this is why possibly they maintain their prosperity. And we reached the 20th century with that quick review, and in the 20th century the Dodecanisa should have been liberated in 1912 during the Balkan Wars, because the Greek Navy reigned supreme in all of the Aegean Sea, but for Italy's capture of the Dodecanisa during the Italian-Turkish War of 1911 and 12. So we had to wait till World War II for the union of the Dodecanisa with Greece, and that meant that Castellorizo and all the Dodecanisa were cut off from the Greek world for 750 years. Yet in that period of 750 years, Castellorizo maintained its Greekness, and there were very few foreigners living on Castellorizo. Nick Pappas referred to a Charles Fellows yesterday. He was a British traveller in 1840, and he also noted that there were about 5 Turks on the island, and in the 19th and 20th century, very few Turks on the island. And even in antiquity, although Castellorizo belonged to the region which is called Lycia, Lycia, it never formed part of the Lycian Confederation, and there are no inscriptions found on Castellorizo in anything than Greek. So Castellorizo's Greekness is unique throughout this 3,000 years history. Can I also say something about Greeks and Castellorians, which is also unique, and it follows the Byzantine flag. If you know the Byzantine flag, it's a double-headed eagle. It looks west and east. And the modern Greek is a European who has got a lot of Eastern tendencies. And the Castellorian too has these same tendencies of being both the European, both the Greek, and the connection to the Asiatic coast. And we heard from Anna Koutzis and we've heard from Nick Pappas about how close that connection was to the Asiatic coast. And indeed, the wealthy Castellorians had their land holdings at places like Antiphalos and places like Myra. And the loss of the Asiatic coastline with the 1922 Asian mining catastrophe meant that a lot of Castellorians lost a lot of their wealth, and it was one of the reasons they could not trade. And then of course the 1926 earthquake and the Italian rule and the other combinations which resulted in the depopulation of Castellorizo. And we should stay a minute about the depopulation of Castellorizo. In the beginning of the 20th century, its population, as you probably all know, was approximately 10,000. I think it might have been 9.5, but let's say 10,000. It was not 13 or 14,000, sometimes we exaggerate, but at 10,000, that was a large number for such a small island. But by 1946, the population, in the census of 1946, was 600 and something. That's a loss of 95% of its population. So that's an incredible depopulation of an island in the space of 40 years. And so the tragedy of Castellorizo from the beginning of the 20th century, with the 2 world wars, the 2 bombardments, the fire, the earthquake, and the difficult economic circumstances, is one of those tragedies that we really should stress and want to know about and make sure the next generation knows about. But what I really want to talk about is the interaction between history and geography, because Castellorizo's location is now of critical importance to Greece. And why is it of critical importance to Greece? Because it allows Greece to have an extended, exclusive economic zone. Sometimes we get confused and say it extends Greece's territorial waters by 80 or 100 kilometres. It's not true. It is the exclusive economic zone that is extended and which allows Greece to participate in the natural gas reserves in the Eastern Mediterranean. The second, you can have that map. The second important reason is that it creates a sea border between Greece and Cyprus. And the third reason is that it allows Greece to participate in the East Med pipeline, which I'll talk about in a little bit, which will start in Israel and finish in Italy, if that goes ahead. But having a look at this map, this is how Turkey views the exclusive economic zone. You'll notice CASTELLORIZO is just there, and in red is the Turkish exclusive economic zone: Cyprus, Syria, Lebanon, Israel, Egypt, and Greece. So, according to Turkey, CASTELLORIZO does not have an exclusive economic zone, and means Greece is cut off from Cyprus and cut off from Egypt, and the pipeline, the proposed pipeline, would go from Israel across here to Crete, to Greece, and then to Italy. On this side is the exclusive economic zone according to international law, not according to Greece, according to international law. Again, this is CASTELLORIZO, and if we follow international law, then all this in blue is Greece's exclusive economic zone, and Greece has a border with Cyprus, and Greece has a border with Egypt, and the pipeline goes through here. Goes under here to Crete, to Greece, and then to Italy. So this is why this moment CASTELLORIZO is so important to Greece, and of course is in the eye of the cyclone. Now, what is the situation in international law? The situation in international law is based on a treaty in 1982 that the United Nations convened in Jamaica, sometimes called the Montego Bay Treaty, and has been signed by almost every country in the world. One country that hasn't signed it, of course, is Turkey. And the Law of the Sea Treaty, which is its proper name, sets out the rights and obligations of countries. And it really is a codification of laws and customary law that have been around for a few hundred years. So it's not really new, but the reality is it has codified it, it is now factual, and it's the established, accepted, recognised law by all nations. Now this law states that each country has territorial waters of 12 nautical miles. Australia has territorial waters of 12 nautical miles, and almost every country in the world has as well. Greece is the only country, or probably one of the only countries, that has 6 nautical miles. Why does Greece have 6 nautical miles? Because in 1995, the Turkish Parliament passed a unanimous resolution, every single Turkish MP voted for it, and it's called the Casus Belli resolution, cause of war. If Greece extends its territorial waters to 12 nautical miles, then Turkey will immediately declare war on Greece. So Greece has not extended its territorial waters, because if Greece were to extend its territorial waters to 12 nautical miles, it means every single Greek island and CASTELLORIZO has 12 nautical miles, which means that the Aegean Sea would then become 81% Greek. And of course Turkey will not accept that, refuses to accept it, and threatens Greece with war. So what has Turkey done in the last few decades? It has created tension in the Aegean by flying over the islands, and you know how often it flies over Castellorizo. Indeed, on the 19th of December, the Greek Defence Minister at that time, Panos Kamenos, was in Castellorizo. And of course, the reason Greek politicians visit Castellorizo so often is to send a message of its Greekness and its importance. But Kamenos was in Castellorizo on the 19th of December, the same day that the Greek Prime Minister, the Cypriot President, and the Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu were in Beersheba in Israel, and they agreed on the East Med pipeline, which I'll talk about in a little while. And so the Turkish response was to fly over Castellorizo. Then Kamenos went to Rome, and the Turkish jets, he went by helicopter, and then the Turkish jets flew right by his helicopter whilst he was landing on Rome. So the situation in Castellorizo is very crucial. Not only do they fly over the islands, it's not only over Castellorizo they fly over many islands. They have now created grey zones saying that some of the rocky islands do not belong to Greece, and there's a list of islands which they now claim as Turkish. Should be noted, they do not claim Castellorizo as Turkish. They have never claimed Castellorizo as Turkish. So they do recognise Greek sovereignty over Castellorizo. But what they do, apart from flying over the islands, is every so often issue a NAVTEX. A NAVTEX is a legal notice to all commercial, mercantile, pleasure craft, every type of shipping that you can't enter a particular region. It's because there'll be naval exercises or with live ammunition. And for some strange reason, they always have these exercises south of Castellorizo. So they're passing a continuous message to the Greek government that this is their exclusive economic zone, not the way Greece and the international community view it. Now, this doesn't only involve Greece. It also involves Egypt and Cyprus and Israel. Now, Greece has been negotiating with Egypt about demarcating the exclusive economic zone between Greece and Egypt. We are lucky that there was a revolution in Egypt a few years ago, because the previous government, the Muslim Brotherhood of Morsi, had very, very close relationship with Turkey. And indeed, Egypt at that time recognised this exclusive economic zone for Turkey. The relationship with the new government of Egypt, with the Sisi government, is very close, very cordial. And the Egyptians have agreed to recognise this exclusive economic zone in a number of meetings that they've had with the Cypriot and Greek governments. Indeed, just in 2018, the Egyptians with Cyprus have demarcated their exclusive economic zone, which along the international law regulations, and Cyprus and Israel are currently arbitrating about their exclusive economic zone. The Egyptians, although agreeing to demarcate the exclusive economic zone along the border as set out in international law, have now been put under pressure by Turkey, and they are somehow backtracking, so that is a concern. Turks have also put pressure on Albania, because Greece had a similar problem in the Ionian Sea with Albania, and Greece and Albania had agreed, they were about to sign a treaty demarcating the exclusive economic zone between the two countries, and Turkey intervened to persuade Albania not to sign it, and indeed that went to the Albanian Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said it shouldn't be signed. So Turkey is not only interfering in the Aegean, it's also interfering in other areas, and And that is one of the reasons the Greek government has gone ahead with this agreement with Fyrom about North Macedonia. It just happened like yesterday, last night, because it's important we focus on Turkey and not on other issues. The other problem that has arisen now is about the territorial waters, which I mentioned are 12 nautical miles. Greece announced a few months ago that it will increase its territorial waters to 12 nautical miles in accordance with international law. And it commenced that by saying it would do it in the Ionian Sea. It's notified Italy, all the way to Kythera, south of the Peloponnese. But it would not proceed to do it in the Aegean until it was ready to do so. There was an immediate response from Turkey that if it did proceed in the Aegean, it would amount to war. So Greece has been put on notice by Turkey in no uncertain terms. And it's not an idle threat, because if you were to visit Izmir, you will drive from Chesme, the port, some of you might have done that, and along there you will see on your right hand side this huge military installation, and at Smyrni, or at Chesme, Turkey has the largest fleet of landing craft in Europe. And those landing craft are aimed at taking some Greek islands. And indeed, in the last month, December, late November, early December, both the Israeli and British Secret Service have advised the Greek government that it is Turkey's objective to take a couple of islands in the Aegean, and CASTELLORIZO. CASTELLORIZO was noted in that. The Greek reaction was to appoint the head of the Greek Armed Forces, Admiral Apostolakis, to the Defence Ministry. So that is the reason for the Defence Ministry being replaced with Apostolakis, the new Defence Minister is Apostolakis. So Greece is taking it seriously, and as you all know, there are units from the Greek army on CASTELLORIZO. There are Greek army forces all around on all the islands. You will hear the Turks say that Greece has breached the Treaty of Paris, the peace agreement, which handed the Dodekanistan back to Greece, in that the islands must be demilitarized, and Greece has militarized the Dodekanistan. The response to that is that under the United Nations Charter, there is a right of anticipatory self-defense, and that is what Greece relies on militarizing the Greek islands. So the third aspect I want to talk about the importance of CASTELLORIZO is this East Med pipeline. As we know, energy is a major issue for the Europeans. Sometimes during cold winters, when Russia cut off the gas supply to Ukraine a couple of years ago, you might recall how the population froze. So this East Med pipeline, no, it's not that one. That's, yes, this is this one. This is the East Med pipeline. This is a huge project, and it's really being pushed by the Israelis, because it's going to carry Israeli natural gas to Europe. It's a difficult project, and there are a lot of people who say it's not going to happen because it's very costly. The European Union has already contributed $15 million towards it, but the biggest problem is, if you can see the depth of the ocean or the sea, it's 3,000 meters. It's very difficult to do this project. But the Israelis are pushing it very hard. Netanyahu hates the Turks, especially Erdogan, with a passion, and he wants this project to sideline Turkey. And this is what is driving the escalation in Turkey's anger and in Turkey's movements in the Aegean. They can see they're being left out of the Eastern Mediterranean, where all this natural gas apparently is. Now, I've spoken to people in Greece, and they say this natural gas one, it's not then the quantities that people assert, and secondly, because of the depths, it's very hard to drill. I don't know, I'm not an expert in the field. However, for everybody to be spending so much money there, there must be something there. And indeed, the ExxonMobil consortium at this moment is drilling just here, and their drilling will finish at just south of Cyprus, and their drilling will end at the end of January. And there's another consortium between the French and the Italians, Total and Eni, which will start very shortly and will last for 9 months. The Israelis have definitely got natural gas here, and the Egyptians have definitely got natural gas there. So it may be that there are huge quantities of natural gas. In any event, the East Med pipeline has been agreed upon by the Israeli, Cypriot and Greek governments, and they will sign the final agreement in February in Crete, provided they get EU confirmation that it's to go ahead. So this is the major pipeline that will sideline the Turks and will make Greece get a lot of benefit out of it, and that is why CASTELLORIZO's area gives Greece that exclusive economic zone, gives this area to Greece. CASTELLORIZO is just here and extends the exclusive economic zone of Greece by 200 kilometres. I didn't define an exclusive economic zone, it's 200 kilometres. It's different from the continental shelf. Continental shelf is to a depth of 200 metres from the coast. So this is why all this activity is happening. The downside of Turkey being left out of all this activity is its aggressive and threatening actions against Greece, and secondly, it has spent hundreds of millions of dollars to buy its own drilling ships, and they've started drilling here, just between Antalya and Cyprus, which is a very bad development because it indicates that Turkey is not interested in a final solution on Cyprus. It's going to push its two-state solution, and up until very recently, Turkey acknowledged the exclusive economic zone, the territorial waters of Cyprus. By doing this latest act, it is now disputing Cyprus's exclusive economic zone and territorial waters. So that's a very negative development. You must know as well that the ExxonMobil drilling that's going on there has an American frigate on standby to make sure its platform's protected. So I don't think Turkey's going to be foolish enough to intervene, though it is threatened. But at one stage, there was something like 70 or 80 ships, fighter ships, naval vessels from many different countries all around this area. Of course, the French sent ships, the British, the Greek Navy. So it's very volatile, it's very dangerous, the situation there. Where does that leave us with CASTELLORIZO? Yesterday, it was suggested that the documentary go ahead, and we support that. We must support everything that puts CASTELLORIZO on the map. We must support events that attract people to CASTELLORIZO. Tourism. I was talking to Angela about how important is the Blue Grotto. That's one of the unique sites in Europe. It should be promoted for tourism. There should be more cultural events on CASTELLORIZO. Anything that can put it on the map. More activity, more people, so that when it's monitored by Turkey, and they're monitoring everything that goes on CASTELLORIZO, they can see that there's a lot of activity on CASTELLORIZO. And every one of us is an ambassador for CASTELLORIZO. John Barbudas was talking about the on the internet about his daughter, Castelorizo girl, with her painting. Every person can promote Castellorizo in his or her own way. There's an old saying, I love my country, not for its beauty or for its size, but because it is my country. And Castellorizans do love their country, and it's obvious because you have third and fourth generation Castellorizans attending events such as this, and that instills pride in everybody, because love of country isn't to get a gun and go and fight or think you're better than someone else. It is an acknowledgement of your roots, where you came from, of the sacrifices of our parents and grandparents who came to this country to give every one of us a better future. And we are indebted to them, and we have our debts to pass on to our children to make sure they knew and they know where they came from. And Castellorizans have been very successful, and it's a matter of pride to say that. It's not boasting to say how successful Castellorizans have been, because it's through hard work and effort and ability and skill. And many times we say that, I say to people in the wider Greek community, the first Greek Australian senator was a Castellorizan, the first Greek federal minister was a Castellorizan, the first Greek Lord Mayor was a Castellorizan, the capital city, the first governor of a state was a Castellorizan, the first magistrate was a Castellorizan. So Castellorizans have been pioneers in many fields, and in medicine. And someone probably most of you have not heard of, Admiral Sir George Zambellas. Has anyone heard of Admiral Sir George Zambellas? First Lord of the British Navy, head of the British Navy from April 2013 to April 2016. So Castellorizans are achievers all over the world. And that tiny little island, which had a maximum of 10,000 people, if you work that out on a pro rata basis, it's pretty successful, and is a source of great pride for everybody. So that's what I really want to talk about, highlight this. As Stephen said, I like to interact with the audience. I'm sure you've got a lot of questions, and I'm happy to answer them.
Okay, we'll take some questions. Do we have another microphone? Put this one. It's an exercise, but I don't need a microphone.
I just wanted to say Turkish people love their country too, and certainly not all of them support Erdogan. I mean, there's an international view of Erdogan as becoming a dictator, etc. Surely part of our solution should be not to offend the Turkish people, but to work with them in terms of looking at how Erdogan might be overcome. I'm just wondering, what your opinions are on our affection for Anatolia and Turkey.
Thanks.
I'm very glad you asked that question, because our relationship with the Turkish people should always be a good one. And it should always be at the people level that we can achieve a lasting peace. The Greek islands of Chios and Lesbos have gone out of the way over the last few years to build a relationship at the local government level. The mayors of the Chios and Lesbos are having many annual events with the mayors on the Asiatic coast, trying to improve the relationship. And if you visit Chios and Lesbos, you will see more Turks there than any other group of tourists. And it is important that with the Turkish people we have this bond, because we are neighbours and we're not going anywhere and they're not going anywhere. And we are so close to the Turkish people, and I get abused for saying this, but we are very, very close to the Turkish people. It is only the religion and language that separates us. Castellorizans in particular had a very close relationship and affinity with the Turkish people. Yesterday we talked about the Visi, and I'll say my 2 cents on it as well. The people of Tbilisi, Greeks and Turks, were very bonded, and the Chepes, the irregular Turkish troops, came there. The Turkish villagers told the Greek villagers to leave. The Greek villagers were so happy they didn't leave, and they were massacred. And that is why Tbilisi is uninhabited. It's a ghost town, because the Turks in the area acknowledge the unjust murder and the souls of the unjust dead in Tbilisi. And I have a blog called Ionian Dream, and in that I write about the importance of being good, having a good, close relationship with the Turks. I push that, I believe in that. However, what we've got to understand, it's not Erdogan who is pushing the aggressive Turkish line. It is a unanimous position first established by the Kemalist governments, and there were mostly Kemalist governments since World War II, who believe in the doctrine of expansion. And the Turkish elite, although they are pro-European and want to be in the European Union, as against Erdogan's supporters, are also in the same page. They have a belief that Turkey was unjustly dealt with after World War I. They had, only 100 years ago, they had a huge empire stretching into North Africa and the Middle East. They lost that empire. They believe that it was taken from them unjustly. They believe that the islands in the Aegean were taken from them unjustly. They believed Syria and Iraq and the oil reserves in Iraq were taken from them unjustly. And their policy is an expansionist one, and it's not Erdogan, I'm afraid to say. And just recently, in 2018, there's a new dogma called the Galaxia Patrida, the Blue Fatherland, and as if the Turkish government or people have got a seafaring tradition. Look at the colour of their flag, look at the colour of the Greek flag. Why is the Greek flag blue and white? And why has every Aegean island, for 4,000 years, every single island been Greek inhabited? And how can the Turks want to take those islands? Talking to some diplomats, they say the Turks don't really want the islands. They want the exclusive economic zone, but in order to have that, you need the islands. So this is the problem. Now, one of the unfortunate things in the world, and Cyprus is the best example of that, is that if you can't help yourself, no one else is going to help you. And there is no way the European Union or anyone else is going to prevent or help Greece or Cyprus in a war with Turkey. And that is why the Greek policy is not to have a war with Turkey, no matter what provocation occurs. And of course the Turks do want to have a war in order to take an island. The new Defence Minister Apostolakis has said if any rocky island is taken, we will level that island. So the red lines have been drawn in the Aegean, and it is a very, very dangerous situation. We hope nothing happens, because we're not going to have any help from anyone. And Turkey does have the largest army in Europe. It is bigger than the British army, it's bigger than the French army, it's bigger than the German army. It is the largest army in Europe.
George.
Thank you, Costa. I just wanted to say, I haven't seen you look at your notes, so kudos to you for not looking at your notes. Obviously this is in your head, so congratulations on that. A lot of passion there. If Israel is obviously got an alliance with America, and they're building this pipeline to go across with the assistance and obviously the agreement from Greece and Cyprus, and obviously we're going to antagonise Turkey for what we're going to do with this, but what backing does Greece have as an alliance that if all this goes south? Because we've got to think about this, right? You're talking about Turkey having the largest army in all of Europe. So they're powerful. Now, you don't want to wake the sleeping giant, but obviously this is going to antagonise, without a doubt. So, do we have a plan B?
Well, it's hard to say. Plan B with the Greek government. Greek government's always predictable. I don't know what it is. But anyway, every time the Turkish ships, warships, come around Cyprus, the Israelis, satellite, monitor them and pass information on to Greece and Cyprus. That's because at this time, at this moment, and things change overnight, Israel and Turkey are in a very bad relationship. So they're on a bad, but we don't know if that's going to stay in a few years' time. In a few months' time, there are elections in May in Israel. Netanyahu may or may not get elected, and it's Netanyahu who's really the anti-Turkish line. Israel and America, of course, are the closest of allies, and this is one of the problems. Up until now, Turkey forms part of that alliance, and for the last 25 years, the relationship between Turkey and America has not been a good one. It's been a bad one from the first Gulf War. However, the American State Department and the Pentagon do not want to lose Turkey. They do not want to lose Turkey. And I say this with experience because I had had this discussion in the Pentagon, in the State Department, with American officials. They do not want to lose Turkey at any cost. So, no matter what Turkey does, somehow the Americans still back off from cutting her off. And if Turkey is important to them, as it was explained over and over again, it was important during the Cold War because they had a border with the Soviet Union. It's important now because there's a rivalry between Turkey and Iran to influence the Central European Muslim populations. And it's important for the United States because Turkey does have a border with Iran, and Iran, of course, is Israel's #1 enemy. So it becomes complex. Another difficult factor to take into account is the unpredictability of someone like Trump in the Oval Office. You just cannot predict how or which way he goes. But in fact, that's right. But in the final analysis, Trump will follow what his advisors will tell him. And he will. As you can see, even in Syria, he was quick to say, we're getting out of Syria, we're going to be out by Christmas, and he's had to do some sort of backflip, yeah. So these are the things that are going to happen. But with the relationship with Turkey and America, it is a bad one at the moment, and the Turks have threatened to buy this S-400 missiles, which are the latest and supposedly the best missiles ever made. The Americans have said that is a no-no, that's a red line, because Turkey is a NATO ally, and it's going to buy these missiles from Russia. America offered to sell them the Patriot anti-aircraft defense system. Congress was blocking it. They unblocked it. They've now sold that to Turkey for $3.5 billion. You would have thought that that would have allayed the Turkish threats and so on. And they said, well, we're still buying the S-400 even after they've agreed to buy it from America. So you don't know what the Turks are going to do. And it is a difficult one to be able to predict or to forecast if the Americans are going to cut them off or not. My gut feeling is they will not cut them off, and Israel will be persuaded to mend its fences with Turkey. There will never be a major war between Greece and Turkey. That's not in America's interest. But there could be a very minor incident in which we lose a couple of islands and then America intervenes to to stop it. And that is what we've got to be very, very careful.
Before I hand to Angelo, you mentioned NATO. We're both NATO allies. Isn't there a non-aggression pact against allies?
Unfortunately, this is one of the sad things, and I say it, I use the Greek expression, underneath nihinaxistis imperimenis abalus, because with Cyprus, Turkey invaded, and Greece was a NATO ally. Greece appealed to Turkey, to the United States, it did nothing. Britain was a guarantor power, it did nothing, another member of NATO. So what the standard response from America and everyone is that both states, both countries, both members should not do anything that exacerbates the situation. And you know, they keep an equidistant, which is just so unacceptable. And it's really terrible.
Just quickly, you touched on it briefly, Costa, but what is Russia's position in real terms? They're just observing in the background, or they're waiting to come in somehow or other through the Orthodox back door or whatever? Can you comment on that?
Thanks, Angelo, for that. What we always think that Greece and Turks hate each other and have the most wars. The most wars have been between Russia and Turkey, and they are really historic enemies. And one of these reasons is because the Russians have backed Greeks as Orthodox, and in that historical timeline, I mentioned Lavros Katsonis, who was a Russian officer who captured Castellorizo in 1768 or something like that. So the Russians have historically supported Greece and have fought a lot of wars against Turkey. But alliances change, and this is why we are living in the first time since the Second World War that there are such crucial movements to change alliances. And for the first time, Turkey and Russia are getting closer together. And there was an unfortunate incident just a few months ago, or an event, where the Greek Orthodox Patriarchate, the Ecumenical Patriarchate, has recognised the Ukrainian Church as autonomous, or autocephalous rather. And this has really upset Putin. It's really upsetting to a situation that he has sent pretty nasty messages, and the Ecumenical Patriarch actually got money from the American government for this. It's a bad move. It's a bad move. It's an unfortunate move because Putin has been instrumental in pressuring the Turks to open Panagia Soumela in Pontos, in having church services in Cappadocia, in having church services in Smyrna. The relationship between Erdogan and the Ecumenical Patriarchate, actually, for your information, has been very good. It has been pretty cordial, in fact better than with Kemalist governments. This move by the Ecumenical Patriarchate under American pressure, unfortunately, is not in our favour. It has antagonised Russia like never before. And the fact that Russia has agreed to sell the S-400s to Turkey is not a very good sign. And you also saw in Syria how Iran, Turkey and Russia got a tripartite convention. The three countries together are working on a Syrian solution. Again, that's because of the Americans' ridiculous foreign policy. They're stuffed up in Syria badly. It is against what the Israelis want to happen. So it's complex. You've got the Israelis against the Turks on one point, but on this issue, it becomes very complicated in different sets of circumstances.
Costa, I know a lot of us have been uneasy about what's going in Castellorizo, but we have been very much informed now from you, and I thank you for that. because we as Castellorisians in Australia need to be a very strong lobby group for what is happening. You remember back in 1946, CASTELLORIZO, even though it became Greek, it was ready to be handed to the Turks because of Churchill's deal with Turkey at the time. And in 1946, because the Castellorisians and the Greek people here, in the seat of Barton, which was a very big Greek Castellorisian seat, had lobbied the then member of Barton, Dr. H.V. Everett, who in fact was a secretary of the United Nations. And it was because of the lobby from the Greeks here, from these Greek Castellorisians, that we didn't lose Castellorizo. Again in 1970, we had a big lobby group from here. What I'm saying that having visited Castellorizo and Greece not that long ago, having met with the Australian ambassador and having met with Michael Kokinos, who's the Secretary of the Greeks Abroad of the Department of Foreign Affairs, can I say that we need to know more. We need to know what we can do as Castellorisians. And I spoke to George Zanis. We're having a KCA annual meeting today, and I want to bring as general business what is happening, what I found out of Castellorizo, what I found out about the Greek authorities, and what is being done to keep Castellorizo alive and promoted throughout Europe. So I thank you very, very much for putting us all in the picture. Thank you.
Well, yes, Doc Everett is famous for his support there, but I'm glad you mentioned Churchill. Churchill promised the world to everybody. He really, he actually promised Chios and Lesbos and Samos to Turkey for them to enter the war. But he thought it was his father's inheritance. But then, anyway, the reality is, yes, we must do things. We must be proactive in keeping Castellorizo literally on a map, and I've actually prepared some resolutions which Michael, if you want to put those up, the resolution right at the end, the last thing. Usually at the end of a conference you pass some resolutions, and they're the ships. Sorry, you want to leave it there? They're the 1913, and this is documented, the number of ships each island had, because they also had 30 ships, 450 sailors, so it was quite incredible. Number for that time, more than Crete. Anyway, we go to the last document. Yeah, documentaries on Castellorizo and films and more tourism and our itineraries, absolutely important. Because, as I said earlier, the Turks are monitoring movements on Castellorizo, and the more activity they see, the more reluctant they would be to instigate anything. But you must also remember, they will tempt or provoke, and it's the Greek response that will determine what happens. So that's why the Greek side is very careful and knows that. Yeah, can we...
I've actually been watching what's been going on for about 12 years now regarding Turkey and Greece and places like that. And it's really come to my attention that the problem is the Muslim Brotherhood, Islam. Now, I've read the Quran, I've read the Hadiths, I've read the Surahs. I know what they're about, and this huge push that you see is this Islamification of Europe. Now I know that upsets people, it upsets me, but having read all the documentation, and I can quote Islam if you like, I think there is real no answer, because it is Islam that's the problem, and it's a theocracy.